Okay, today I want to show you, after you've made your clay cylinder or your clay box, how you can add some of your designs onto your clay. You can actually raise images up off the surface, you can carve images in, or you can actually cut a hole all the way through your clay, and since we're making luminaries, you can have the candle in there and the light will show through the areas that you cut through completely. Instead of working on the box or the cylinder, which would block the view of what I would be doing, I'm going to work on a flat piece of clay. These two pieces of clay are already leather hard, so they'll be easy for me to attach for you. Normally, I would do the part where I cut the shape out of the clay while it was still plastic and then let it dry to leather hard, but for the sake of being able to get this video done more quickly, I am working from the leather hard. So you'll roll out your slab of clay like normal, and whatever design you want to put on it, you're going to take some kind of tool. You can use a pointed stick, we have a few of those in the classroom. You can use a dull pencil, it doesn't matter. Anything that you can draw with. I'm going to just draw a heart shape on here because it has a point and some curves, so it'll be good for showing you how to deal with those two aspects of a design. So once you roll your slab out, the first thing you do is you draw lightly. And then if you like your shape, you can go ahead and cut it out, but if you don't like it, you can rub out an area and redraw. You'll also be able to shape this a little bit more once it's put onto the clay as well. Now that I have my shape drawn, I'm going to get one of my tools. It really doesn't matter which one, as long as it has kind of a thin edge. So I'm going to use the thin edge of this tool, and I'm going to go around that line that I drew. And I'll go ahead and cut that out. As you're cutting, you want to make sure you hold your tool upright, not side or angled to one side or the other. I can take this out, and like I said, normally I would have cut it from the plastic state. It's a little bit easier, and then I would have left it to dry on the canvas for a few minutes until it got to a leather hard state. But we're already at leather hard, so we can move on to the next step. If the scrap clay was still very plastic, I could just ball it back up and wedge it. This I will put in the scrap bag with some water, and then we can wedge it later to use for something else. So I would then put my heart wherever I want it on the cylinder or the box that I've made. Again, I'm working flat so that you can see better. And I'm going to take my tool and I'm just going to trace this heart so that I know where I want it to go. And now that I have that outline, that's the area I need to score to put my crosshatch marks. So again, these marks don't need to be nice and neat, but I'm going to go ahead and put little cross marks all over the surface of the inside of that heart. And put some a few different directions. And I'm going to do the same thing on the back of my heart. So I now have my crosshatch marks everywhere that the surfaces are going to touch. I'm going to take my slip cup, and you can use your finger or a tool, and we're going to spread some slip over top of all the marks. I'm not pressing hard. I don't want to rub my marks out. I do want to cover them. Once I have those marks covered up, I'll scrape any extra slip back into the cup. I'll take my piece that I'm adding on top, line it up where it should go, and then I want to press from one direction and make sure I press firmly. And it's really important that I just go one direction at a time. That way I'm pushing out any air bubbles from underneath the clay. If I were to do the outsides first and move to the inside, I could actually trap some air under there, which could cause the piece to explode in the kiln when we fire it. Okay, so I'll just double check one more time, make sure everything is flat. Okay. Now just like when we did put the walls together of the cylinder in the box, we do need to seal off the edges of the seam. So I'm going to just remove the extra slip. And when we did the walls of the clay, we used the coal of clay to do that. For some of these pieces that you're adding, you're not going to want to have the bulk of the coal there. So what you can do instead is you can pull some of the clay down from the side of the piece you've attached and pull it along the wall that you attached it to. So I'm going to go all the way around the heart, and I'm just pulling a little bit of clay down from the side of the heart onto the wall that I've attached it to. If you're going to be adding more than one piece, you want to do this as you add the pieces. You don't want to wait until you've added all of them because you'll have less access to reach it with your tool or your finger. So doing it as you go will make it a little bit easier. So before I finish this last one, so you can still see where that slip is coming out. If I wipe that slip away, you can see a harsh edge. And on the other places, it's not smooth yet, but that seam has been sealed up. Now that I've gone the whole way around, I can use my finger to smooth it out. I'm going to try to do it without water first. If it's being really stubborn, I can use some water. My finger might not get into this little space where the heart dents in, so I might have to use a tool to smooth there. So I'll get that corner, and then I can go back and touch up where the tool left a mark. And you can see as I did that, it raised some clay up here. So I'm going to take that clay that's on the edge and I'm going to pull that in to the center of the shape. Again, I'm going to attempt to do this without using any added water first. And as I did that, it pushed some clay back on the outside, but not as much this time. So we might have to go back and forth from smoothing the side to smoothing the top of the shape a couple times. And each time we do so, there'll be less extra clay. And at this point, if you don't like the shape at all, you can still push the clay to shape it, to reshape it a little bit. And then if it does have any stubborn areas, just put a teeny bit of water on your finger. That will help you get those stubborn marks out. But do not add any more water until you use up all the water that you've already put on. Don't leave it just sitting on the surface. Really rub it into the clay. I recommend adding all your raised up areas first, and then going on to cutting out shapes or carving out areas. Okay. So I'm going to actually cut a heart out from the center of this heart. So I'm just going to do the same thing with a tool where I draw, and I'm going to show how thick I want the walls of this heart to be. If I'm not happy with the shape that I drew, I can cut it, rub it out and redraw it. If I am happy, I can use my tool to cut it out, just like I cut out the other heart. Now, when you're working on a box or a cylinder, it's going to be really important that you keep your hand behind what you're cutting so that you don't cause it to collapse in or break or crack. This tool is not sharp, so you can have your hand behind it. If you had a sharp one, you'd have to be careful that you had your fingers on either side, and we're not going to worry about doing that in this class. Okay. But you still don't want to jam the tool through really fast, because even though it's not sharp, it could hurt if you hit yourself with it quickly. So we're going to just use a gentle pressure. So I have my hand behind here to support it to keep it from breaking. And I'm just going to go ahead and start cutting out this shape. Now on a flat piece like this, I could actually just have this on the ground and cut it out, but since you will be adding your imagery to a 3D piece, I'll continue to keep my hand behind it to demonstrate that technique. Now, a good thing to think about with points is I don't really want to keep going around the point. I want to go towards the point from each side. So I'm going to come over here, and that's just more likely to give me a nice crisp point instead of deforming it. Now some shapes you might be able to cut the whole shape out like this one. And if so, you could even consider slip and scoring this somewhere else onto your clay and having that image raised up in a different area. Other ones are going to be more complicated, so you might have to cut like part of the shape out and then a different part out, little pieces at a time, to not have your clay break. Once you have cut this out, we're going to smooth the inside. If it's a large enough cut, you can just use your finger, which this shape would be large enough to do completely with your finger. Towards the point, to really get that smooth, I might take 2 fingers and go towards the edge of it. Other ones that are smaller shapes, you might need to use a tool and rub back and forth to smooth it out. If your shape has a point like this one, you need to take a little clay from the edge of one side of the point and just wrap it to the other side of the wall. So if it's a square, a diamond, any random curve that's pointed, you just need to take a little bit of the clay from one side of the wall and wrap it around to the other. And the reason for that is if you don't do that, as the clay dries, it might crack moving away from that point. Okay. So once you have the inside fairly smooth, you're going to see where you cut it out, there's a bunch of clay sticking up. We're going to support from the other side, so I have my hand behind here, and I'm going to pull any of that extra clay away from the opening. And as I do that, there was so much extra clay, I might get some back in the middle, so I'm going to probably have to repeat this process. Smooth the inside, smooth the outside, smooth the inside. The same thing, there's a little bit that's up here. So again, we're going to remove the extra clay by moving it away from the opening. Go back, smooth the inside a little bit more. Continue, smooth the outside on both sides of the surface. And every time you do that, there'll be a little bit less extra clay, so it'll be a little bit neater and a little bit neater. It might take you 3, 4, even 5 times to get it completely smooth. At this point, I have it fairly smooth. The clay is a little bit on the wet side, so my finger is putting some marks in it as I'm smoothing. This is a good amount of smoothness, but if I let it dry a little bit longer, I could come back and get those last few little marks out of it. The final way that you can add imagery to your surface is to carve that imagery out. I really recommend using a sgraffito tool, which is this little tool that has a little loop, and it's really great for carving out lines. So say I just wanted to carve some more heart shapes around the one I've already made. This tool will actually remove a piece of clay as I go. And every so often I'll have to pick it up and just get the extra clay out from there. And then I can continue wherever I left off. And every time I pick up the clay tool, I clean it, get the extra clay out, start where I left off. And I'm going to make a nice, neat, clean line that way. I could draw in it with a pointed stick or a dull pencil, but I'd be more likely to have clay shavings stick up from my marks, which would make my lines not as neat and crisp. So this is the tool of choice unless you need a really thin line. Now, there are a couple little clay shavings here. If I try to knock these off right now, they're coming off pretty clean, but if the clay was too wet, they could actually make it messy. But if I let them dry a little bit first, then I can easily brush them off. Right. And that is all you need to do to add the imagery onto your clay. Thank you.